Hello everybody, this is Dr. Cole. It's Sunday afternoon, December 11th, and this will be my Week 8 message for Political Science 1013 on the second 8-week schedule for the fall term of 2022. Everybody, this will be the last message of the term. Today's Sunday the 11th. Grades are due 1 week from today, the 18th. So this will be my last message to you for the term. The final exam is up on the course website. It will be available to you Tuesday and Wednesday for 48 hours. I cannot give final exams early. I can give them late if necessary. So if for some reason you cannot take it Tuesday or Wednesday, please contact me and we can make arrangements for you to take the exam late if necessary. The material will be the material from Units 7 and 8, the class notes on the Supreme Court and Congress. Plus, you've been assigned 4 articles, 2 on the Supreme Court, 2 on Congress. Expect 10 or 15 true false items on those 2 articles. You have 2 articles about whether the Supreme Court is facing a crisis of legitimacy. Justice Elena Kagan thinks it is because of some controversial decisions that have been made and the way the composition of the court changed in its membership, especially during the Trump administration. Law professor Ilya Somin does not agree. So you sort of have pro and con articles to look at there about whether the Supreme Court is facing a crisis of legitimacy. On Congress, you have an article about Representative Kevin McCarthy from the Wall Street Journal, who may become Speaker of the House. He has been the House Minority Leader, so you might think he would be in line to be Speaker, although it's not 100% certain. And I think this article addresses that. Okay, so you have that article to read. Then you have an article by Carl Hulse of the New York Times about the Senate. The title is, roughly speaking, "What's Wrong with the Senate?" or words to that effect. What's the matter with the Senate? Many senators, several senators, are not running for re-election, did not run for re-election, including some who might have gotten re-elected easily if they had run. Several governors were expected to possibly run for the Senate, and they did not. Many of these were Republicans, so all that might have prevented the Republicans from gaining a majority in the Senate, which they did not. Okay. All right, so you want to take a look at that. Basically what it comes down to is there's reason to believe the Senate has become a less attractive place to serve in recent years. So what might the reasons for that be? All right, so those 4 things to read, plus your class notes for Units 6 and 7 will be the material for the final exam on Tuesday and Wednesday, or later if necessary. Okay. Term papers, I haven't heard from many students about term papers. If you were doing a term paper, remember it's not absolutely mandatory, but it could help you drop a low exam score. Okay. If you throw in something together at the last minute, or if you've been working on something for longer than that, try to have it in by Thursday. I could look at something Friday or Saturday if absolutely necessary, but it would help me to get those in by Thursday. You may attach them to an email to me or upload them to the course website. Look at the modules area of the course website and look for the tab that says term papers. Click on that and you can upload the term paper there. Everybody, we've been sort of rushed this term with an exam every 10 or 12 days. That's the way of the world on the 8-week schedule. Let me say just a few words about Unit 8 on Congress. We may have said a bit about this last week. We begin by discussing the kind of people who do and do not serve in Congress. And some people think there's an issue about how diverse they are or are not. Okay, take a look at that. As part of that, we try to go through the members of Congress from the Oklahoma Panhandle, the state of Oklahoma, and surrounding states. Now, this was done before the midterm elections. Some of these people are going to change once the new Congress meets in January. The ones up there will continue to serve until early January. But for instance, if you are from eastern Oklahoma, Mark Wayne Mullen will no longer be your House member. He's been elected a senator from Oklahoma. replacing the retiring Senator Imhoff. Okay, so there'll be a new House member from eastern Oklahoma. There may have been changes in one or two of those other House districts. I believe those will be the only changes, but those will take effect in January 2023 when the new Congress convenes. We talk about how these people get elected, especially in the House of Representatives. We emphasize that they're pretty much on their own when it comes to putting together their campaign and raising money to try to win the right to use the label of one or the other of the major parties as the nominee of that party in the party primary. Okay? This incentivizes them in a certain way and affects the way they do their job once they get elected to the House, especially. Okay? In the House, they face the public every 2 years. So once they get elected, the next election is right around the corner. This may influence them to commit a lot of effort to convincing the people in their district that they're serving the interests of the people in the district. And that can take the form of either constituent service or pork barrel spending projects or both. So please be sure to look at that. Okay? That all has to do with the members' career back home, as it is called, members' relationships with their constituents. Okay. The other aspect of a member's career is the career in Washington, D.C. Now, we discuss the committee and subcommittee system, the process by which a bill becomes law, the leadership positions. Remember, many of these leadership positions will be changing in January 2023. Representative Pelosi will no longer be Speaker. It may be Representative McCarthy. Okay. That chart in your class notes, and it may also be in your textbook, a version of it that portrays the process by which a bill becomes law, that is what we call regular order. Regular order allows members to cooperate across party lines in the committee and subcommittee system as they work on legislation. But the problem is it's become more difficult to do that in recent years because of the sharp partisan divide and lack of overlap in the views of Democratic and Republican members in Congress. So these days, very often, the leadership of the two parties, along with the White House, have to come to an agreement on important legislation. And then they will introduce the legislation directly to the floor of the House and the Senate, bypassing the committee and subcommittee system and bypassing regular order. And many members are upset about that. They would like to see a return to regular order. Now, one area where we might like to see regular order would be the budget. And we talk about the budget process very briefly. Now, we also discuss the tradition of the filibuster in the Senate, the maneuver by which one senator can bring the business of the Senate to a halt unless 60 votes can be accumulated to invoke cloture and cut off debate. Now, one thing that's happened in recent times with the filibuster is that whereas it used to be a sort of measure of last resort, it has become almost routine to the point that you need these days 60 votes instead of 51 to pass legislation. However, it's very important to them to get the budget passed. So they've arranged to prevent the budget from being filibustered. Nowadays, only legislation can be filibustered. Appointments or nominations, confirmation of nominations, cannot, especially to the judiciary, including the Supreme Court. None of that can be filibustered. Legislation can be filibustered, but the budget cannot. At least if a measure is classified as budgetary, it bypasses any possibility of filibuster under the reconciliation procedure. That requires sometimes interpretation as to whether a measure is budgetary or not, and that often is up to the position of the person in the position of Senate parliamentarian, who comes under pressure very often to try to determine whether a measure is budgetary or not. All right. Very often these days they are late in passing the budget. It's supposed to be passed by October 1st for the following fiscal year, but they often miss that deadline. So they have to pass continuing resolutions to keep the government funded temporarily until they can agree on a proper budget. A continuing resolution generally says simply, keep spending money at the same rate as in the last budget until we can pass a budget. And they've often been late in doing that in recent years. On a couple of occasions, there have even been temporary government shutdowns because they have not been able to agree on how to fund the federal government. All right, so the budget is something that is very important and which has been held up very often in recent years. Now, your class notes also discuss the great British statesman Edmund Burke and his views on whether the member of the legislature ought to be a trustee or a delegate. Edmund Burke thought they should be trustees, but very often these days, it seems they think of their role strictly as a delegate. Look at those notes and be sure you are clear on the distinction. We also talk about the time pressures on a member of Congress, the things that place pressure on a member demanding his or her time, especially fundraising, because they're all responsible for raising their own money for their re-election campaign, and it takes a lot of money. It takes up more of their time than you might realize. Then at the very end of those class notes, we talk about the system as a whole, some of the issues facing our political system, and some of the things that have happened that have led people to conclude that we are approaching a crisis point, such as the events of January 6, 2021, which with any luck we'll be able to avoid repeating in the future. But it gives people pause as to whether possibly some of the things I try to teach about in a course like this might have to be thrown out the window at some point. So that's where we stand as of late in the year 2022. That then is it for Political Science 1013 for the second 8-week term. Final exam Tuesday and Wednesday. Please try to have papers in Thursday if you possibly can. With regard to any late work that needs to be turned in, any other problem, issue, or question, please contact me either through the course website or at david.cole@opsu.edu. Otherwise, good luck and take it easy, study hard, and I hope you've had a successful, constructive term, and I will perhaps see you again for another course sometime. Thanks a lot.